the CFO felt so bad for me. He like gave me $100 and he was like, "Don't tell your mother."
Wow.
Whoa.
Okay.
Welcome to Practice Project. If you're a CEO, senior leader, or board member navigating the fast-evolving world of business, you have found your hub of actionable insight and no-nonsense discussion.
We're going to kick off our session today with a nice little icebreaker. Marcus, you want to surprise us with this one?
Yes. What is the most unusual job or side gig you ever had
Usual job or side gig?
that you
Yeah.
feel comfortable sharing?
Okay. Yeah, that could go in lots of different directions. That's true. I would say, yeah, like when I was probably in junior high, my mom was a CPA and she had an office in this little, like, it wasn't a strip mall, but it was just like this tiny little office building that had small offices, like individual offices for people. And I would vacuum the hallways, the floors, and clean the bathrooms. Cleaning bathrooms was never really very fun.
And that inspired you to,
I don't know. There was some compensation involved. I don't want to get her in trouble, by saying she's paying me under the table or something.
It's not child labor if it's for a good cause, am I right?
I don't remember the details. Let's put it that. I'll plead the fifth.
yeah.
Barry, your story brought to mind something similar. So my mother also was an accountant. And every spring break, I would have to do all this like AP work for her, all this like admin work and all by hand at that time, but I never got paid. So then finally the CFO felt so bad for me. He like gave me $100 and he was like, "Don't tell your mother."
Wow.
Whoa.
Okay.
Don't tell your mother or my mother.
Okay.
That was not what came to mind. What came to mind was during college, I was a note taker. So I would go in New York City. One of them was L'Oreal, listen to, what they thought on their focus group. But it was pretty interesting. I would just sit there and write every single word and transcribe everything throughout. I was in college and it was like a first up close view into how some of these focus groups worked.
That's
cool.
really cool. Yeah. So both your moms are accountants and
Yeah.
they're both
And
issues with pay.
hers was guilty of child labor.
And then your mom is guilty of unreportable tax income. Okay. Well, my mom was not an accountant, but I've had a lot of like really weird side jobs and gigs over the years. So I started an airplane cleaning business when I was in high school. So my dad worked at an airport and they had a need to clean planes for the state of Missouri. Like, so the planes that like the governor and the officials traveled in. So it was kind of a cool experience. I was also a wrestling referee in college and also a flambe chef, if you can believe that. I had that was a real sweet spot for me, high school to college, doing weird shit for money.
Sure, they'll sell it to me. People will do anything for the right amount of money. Okay.
But I love it. Well, let's jump into our article for this episode. Should a CHRO abandon performance improvement plans, otherwise known as a PIP? So companies are investing in all this AI-enabled modern technology and platforms for coaching. So why are so many still clinging to this 1990s style playbook of PIPs? I literally had a client call last night with someone saying, "Hey, can you help me put an executive on a PIP?" I'm like, well, let's talk about that. And Marcus, you said you get that all the time as well.
All the time. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, I'd say it's more of a cost-cutting initiative, but we're calling it a PIP.
Yeah, but it's interesting to think about that from a cost basis perspective. Like replacement cost is high. Some
Yes.
people would argue it's between 50% to 3 times someone's salary to replace someone. So if I'm using a PIP with a mindset of just like, I just want to get the person out of there, you could argue PIPs are expensive because I'm not trying to optimize the resources I have. I'm going to incur replacement costs to force this person out.
It's interesting because one of my experiences were you couldn't simply let go of somebody, even if it was at will employment. So we had to go through this whole exhaustive process, which was exhausting for both parties. So if you as a manager really wanted to remove an employee from a team that you thought was warranted, you had to go through this exhaustive exercise. Really, you're just shifting the cost into the person putting together a lot of the paperwork behind all this.
Yeah, I think it's that cost of replacement, also the potential risk of a post-employment lawsuit or a claim, EEOC claim or something like that, which also has a cost to it. But then you weigh that against like the cost of inefficiencies or ineffectiveness that are there. And so either way you have costs. It's how do we value those and what do we think the likelihood is of each of those?
Yeah. And I think, another vantage point on this is what is the source of the inefficiency or the ineffectiveness? So one of my favorite quotes is that unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments. So if I don't tell you what my expectations are, there's no way you can meet my expectations. And then I'm going to resent the fact that you didn't meet my expectations. We didn't align on them. I didn't clarify them. And so I often see leaders, managers making this mistake, if you will, of really failing to align on what outcome expectations are.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I want to dictate the how, then, okay, fine. I need to tell you that as opposed to just assuming you're going to figure it out versus sort of the what. If I want to assign you a what to accomplish and the how is up to you, then I genuinely need to let you figure out and do it the way you want to do it, as long as the outcome meets these stated objectives. But oftentimes people get so caught up in the how, like you have to do it the way I have always done it, or it has always been done. And if you don't do that, then you failed expectations. But then we fail to talk about the lack of meeting expectations as well, which creates a whole other thing around the accumulation of feedback debt. Because I didn't give you the feedback, now there's feedback debt. That leads to confirmation bias. So in my head, every single little misstep, there's a whole story that's spinning about how you don't care, you can't do it, you're not good enough. And then I end up in this situation where someone who legitimately has the capability to deliver an efficient, effective outcome, but because I haven't taken the time to actually clarify my expectations, we're now in a situation where they are perceived as being ineffective, right? Or inefficient. And now we're talking about, oh, we got to put this person on a PIP. They're no good. They can't do these things. They never do stuff right or on time or whatever. And so I often see those kinds of scenarios play out. Anyway, that was a little bit of a sidebar, but totally agree that the ineffective, inefficient is also costly in addition to the cost of replacement.
That's a very, very human thing. That I guess that's where my head gets filled. The article talked about AI-enabled like training or development to help people meet expectations. But to me, you get back to the fundamental problem of, have those expectations been communicated? And I see, PIPs, I see this all the time, just inconsistent use, unrealistic expectations. And if I'm working with a client that is like, like you, hey, we want to put someone on a PIP. Okay, well, let's time out. I need to understand how we got here, because what you think is going to happen going forward. If you ultimately view a PIP as something that like we have to check this box so that we can exit them from the organization, a PIP is going to introduce more time. Like we can't put someone on a PIP, give them 30 to 60, 90 days to improve and then cut them short. Like that's a real quick way to incur liability. It has to be a genuine opportunity to improve. It's literally in the title. But how did we get here? Did you give authentic feedback? Or did you avoid the conflict? Like we all want to avoid that conflict. It's uncomfortable. But I also thought about, I don't know if you guys have read the book Radical Candor.
Yeah.
But you give tough feedback because I have high expectations and because I think you can meet them. And so, I've heard like coaches talk about this, like, I'm going to coach you hard because I think you have real potential and I think you can meet it. So it's not me trying to beat you down. It's me trying to tell you exactly where you need to go. And that is really hard to do if you don't have a genuine connection with the person. And so the way that I think about it is I want to make the people that I'm leading feel very comfortable with me. And so for me, I want to show vulnerability.
And I think to your point, taking that step back and looking at what's the leading cause of when PIPs are issued and understanding what's driving that. You start to dig in with people on, why are we doing this PIP? When did this start happening? Oftentimes people will say, well, I don't know, it's been going on for a year and a half. I'm finally dealing with it. I'm like, why did you wait a year and a half to give quality feedback to someone? From a Radical Candor perspective, if you really cared about them as a person, you would tell them they weren't doing a good job, and you didn't do that. So, but then you got to, keep asking the why, like go down the rabbit hole a little more. Like, well, why aren't you giving feedback? Why is there misalignment? And my guess is that we haven't trained or equipped people to have those conversations, to adequately define the jobs, to have the skill sets to give high quality feedback, the comfort level with the discomfort of having the awkward feedback conversation. And we have to build those things in to the organization. And again, this isn't about like preventing PIPs necessarily, but PIPs have become this ubiquitous catch-all exit strategy as opposed to really fixing what's further upstream and creating better processes, which actually lead to much more efficient, much more effective organizations than a bunch of PIPs is going to do. Like PIPs are never going to drive efficiency. PIPs will never drive increased performance or effectiveness in organizations. They simply don't. That's not how people are using them today, and that's not how they're going to be effective.
That was a big takeaway for me from the article. It was something that I kind of thought intuitively, but I'd never seen data on it. But the amount of people that actually successfully exit PIPs, only 1 out of 6 people survive a PIP. And of the ones that, and of that 1 of 6, a large majority of people end up on medical leave or some other avenue, which employees are smart, So if they know, and there are Reddit threads out there, like, I'm getting negative feedback. I've always kind of joked about that. Like, well, if we give someone really tough feedback, they might have a medical issue pop up. It just always seems to happen. But that's also a very human reaction. They're trying to protect themselves. And if they don't feel like they can succeed, I mean, what are my other options? I need to, give myself some time so I can figure out what my next step is.
If your goal is high retention of high performing people, PIP just doesn't sound like the tool in the way that it's typically constructed to do that. Right now, to say all of that, I also think it's important to say if you create the right environment and people are struggling for some reason or another, and you believe that there is a path forward, well, then I think you can actually structure a high quality performance improvement plan. But it is one that's got to have resources tied to it. It's got to have, coaching and mentoring tied to it, clear expectations and goals that are achievable. And there has to be a cultural mindset that I want success to be achieved here. In a radical candor kind of view, like, I care about you and I believe you've got a great role here. This is just something we need to course correct.
Yeah, I also thought about setting expectations. That's where job descriptions become very important. Yep. And it's not just something that we throw together like, oh, we're going to hire someone, slap together a job description. I've also seen scorecards. I had a scorecard. All of our executive team had a scorecard at Tandem, and beyond the job description, like, this is what success looks like. And it kind of paints it out. And then we would have, quarterly, like, let's talk about how do you think you're doing? It was very collaborative and back and forth, but then you felt like we could have a real conversation about it. And it's not such a defensive thing. Like, oh, we're going to have a conversation about my performance. I need to justify myself. You could be very honest.
Right. So you bring up the phrase fire fast, hire slow. I think that's like the extreme take on it. But I mean, I think if we're talking about from the financial perspective, like the collateral damage attached to all the aftermath and all the ongoing torture that's going to go through this whole process is going to be really costly. And I can't imagine how any sort of company department would be remotely efficient. I think there'll be a lot of immeasurable impact in terms of efficiency and all the shrapnel associated with that. So I don't see how this would even financially benefit any company. So I think we just need to rethink the whole process and probably start from the beginning, starting with the job descriptions.
If we're getting to a point of a PIP, I think that's an interesting lens to look at too. Like, was it a bad hire, or did something else happen? Is it bad management? My experience is management always likes to say, well, it was just a bad hire. When and that just kind of absolves them of responsibility for, like, no, they were a good hire. We went through the interviews. They were clearly qualified to do this. Something happened when they got here and that they weren't being managed or led effectively. My experience has been that a lot of companies shy away from that conclusion.
I think you're right. I think it's rare that we talk about the manager playing a role in the creation of the issue.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think gets to, is investing early in intervention infrastructure, putting in place a practice of the correlation of job description, creating a normalcy of feedback and conversations in the environment, clarify your culture of how you deal with underperformance. So let people know in advance, like, if you start to struggle, if your performance starts to deteriorate, here's what we're going to do. And this is why we're doing it. And we're doing it because we care. We want you to succeed. We want to give you the tools to succeed. And so we don't do PIPs as an exit strategy. That's not how we do it. If we need to exit you, we're going to have that conversation and be transparent about it. But if we believe there's actually an opportunity for you to improve, like, that's what we use these things for. And that's what those conversations are for. We all know organizations are notorious for promoting high performing individual contributors into managerial roles without any training or support. So how is it then possible that it's got to be the employee's fault? Like, why are we not looking at what we're doing for manager training? So how do we equip managers to take those job descriptions and build better expectations, have the high quality feedback conversations, the coaching, the mentoring along the way? We've got to equip the managers to do a better job with that. That's how you start to think about building in that early intervention piece and not letting these things lag on where you're getting to massive feedback debt and confirmation bias and pips and things to just try to push people out of the organization.
Yeah. I would say another takeaway for me, Terry, is like one-on-ones are essential, at least bi-weekly, one-on-ones where you share that feedback in I don't even want to say informal because you should have an agenda, but in more of a casual setting, as opposed to, hey, I need to schedule a meeting with you to talk about your performance. It also helps you build rapport so that when you do have to give that feedback, it's like, oh, I'm talking to my manager for the first time in 3 months. Something's wrong.
Yeah. That's a great takeaway, Marcus. Yeah. High quality one-on-ones is important. Valerie, anything else you want to add on this?
So I think a lot of investment, I will say we get a little gun shy about investing up front with training and the hiring process, quite frankly. And then I think we see the impact of it. And I actually think if any financial person is thinking of this, there's a lot more financial impact if you don't do those investments up front. If you think about all of the stringing along, all of the toxic culture, all the impacts that are not as measurable, I'd say it's far more expensive than just investing in hiring and training up front.
Great point.